Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and I'm really excited to be talking about more Pokemon, obviously. But there's this really cool new feature added to the Limitless website, Limitless TCG, that is really useful. The City Leagues are tournaments in Japan, and that's really nice because previously they did not report many Japanese tournaments. This isn't actually Japanese, but it's in the Japanese format, which is actually the regular format. The Japanese standard is actually regular standard, and then this standard is actually international standard. Anyway, what I'm saying is we can now look at post-rotation lists, which is a little awkward to do. There are a bunch of Japanese tournaments, but they're not sorted quite as well, but it's fine. Today, though, you saw the title, you saw the thumbnail, talking about Charizard and Chien-Pao, two decks currently in standard pre-rotation that are good. I think some people don't think Chien-Pao is super good. I think it's like decent, though. I certainly think it's a top 10 deck. And Charizard's very arguably the best deck in the game because obviously Charizard DX, you see it right here, 330 HP, and it hits pretty decent damage, but mostly the high HP. Solid damage, and it powers up other Pokemon. These are post-rotation lists. I actually have not looked at them yet. I just like glanced, compiled a few, and I think relatively accurately represent the meta in Japan and uh, actually I think these are all from Japanese tournaments, but this is pretty cool. So this is all post rotation, meaning we're losing Val VIP Pass. We are losing um, I don't know, that's the main card. We're losing Rope. I'm trying to think what else we're losing. But we're losing Path. We're losing Path. That's a really big deal. So in this list, for example, we see no copies of Lost Vacuum. We see one Stadium and Collapsed Stadium, which can be used to remove our bench Pokemon. But that's a really great addition, like, not addition to this deck, but it helps the deck out, right? It's a loss for other decks, and it's really good for Charizard. And then there are some new cards. Keep in mind the new cards are not officially out in English or out in English at all. Some have been revealed, but I quite frankly don't know the names of them. So I'm going to be going off of the translation names or what I've heard, but there are certain other like names that you may have heard them gone by if you've seen other videos. So first of all, this is straightforward Charizard with Barrel. I was looking through, and most people played it with Barrel. That's pretty common. I don't know. You can play it with Pidgeot, and I like it with Pidgeot. We'll take a look at a few Pidgeot lists. First of all, we need to talk about this card, Friendship Poffin or Buddy Poffin. Search deck for up to two basic Pokemon with 70 HP or less. Put them onto your bench, then shuffle your deck. And that's a pretty big deal because it replaces Battle VIP Pass, but only for a certain Pokemon. So that's why we see Bidoof and then the Charmanders. And we also see Skwovet, Manaphy, Jirachi. Those are all under 70 HP. Easy to get off of Friendship or Buddy Poffin. And that is quite useful. But then Pokemon like Entei V, Lumineon V can't be grabbed. Lumineon V wouldn't really work. It's on play, so that's why we don't run for Nest Ball. But there is no Rotom V, for example, because that is harder to get. Even though we do have Forest Seal Stone and a bunch of Arvin, it's just a little bit more, or actually a lot more awkward to grab turn one because of no Battle VIP Pass instead with a Buddy Poffin. The other new card, we have a few new cards, but we see Codebreaker's Solution. I've seen it as Cryptomaniac's Deciphering as well. Search your deck for up to two cards, shuffle your deck, then put those two decks on top of it in any order. Um, I think that wording's kind of off. I don't know. It's the same as Mallow though. Mallow is a card that was previously in the game, and that some of you may know. It's the same card. This is Future, which could matter. Not for this though. I don't believe. In fact, I don't know. I don't think it really interacts with much. It doesn't matter that it's Future very much, but it is. So it's pretty much just like Mallow, and so you can combine this with the Barrel versus Pidgeot. It doesn't really do it. So you can stack two cards on top of your deck with Codebreaker's Deciphering or whatever. I think I mixed. I was live streaming a lot. My words are all over the place, but I mixed up the two names. But it doesn't really matter because we don't know what it's actually going to be as far as I am aware. So you can put two cards on top of your deck, say Charizard, very handy, then put Barrel from. I've heard people talk about this card and say it's kind of like another, like Arvin. We'll talk about that later, but it does get any two cards, so it's arguably better, right? Then we obviously see Counter Catcher, Boss, but then we see Prime Catcher. Prime Catcher is, it's like Guzma, it's like Cross Switcher. Switch up your opponent's active, switch out your opponent's active to the bench, bring up another one of their Pokemon, and then switch out one of your benched and active. So that's really useful because you choose your opponent's side. It's a gusting card. It's incredibly powerful. And it seems like there's a high amount of gusting with 5, but you're not necessarily going to be using all of them. I guess I get it. And Charizard is kind of reliant on gusting a Pokemon like Lumineon V, uh, mostly Lumineon. That's like the big one that's easy to one shot. But there are some others. Squawkabilly EX as well. That's another one. And then you do have Radiant Charizard. Radiant Charizard is quite useful. We see Entei V making a return as well. Of course, has synergy with Forest Steel Stone. And we see Team Evolution, very commonly played with the Barrel Charizard based list. And pretty straightforward stuff, but still a very good deck. It loses almost nothing, and that's why it's still a top deck post rotation. Again, this list is very similar. The other list ran Defiance Band. This one runs Choice Belt to do 30 more 2 Vs, so you can one-shot stuff like Rotom V, as well as just a ton more Vs. It's very hard to one-shot Vs doing 180, but doing 210 is much better, and then doing 240 if they've taken one prize, even better. You're one-shotting almost every basic V. In fact, you might be one-shotting everyone. I don't know all of them because like Blissey V is rotating, but anyway, it's very useful. And then Maximum Belt. This is very similar to Choice Belt, except you do 50 more 2 EXs, but it is your A-Spec card, so you cannot play this in addition to Prime Catcher. And Prime Catcher is also really good. I didn't really talk about it too much, but if you play a card like Arven, then you get to grab the Prime Catcher and play the Prime Catcher in addition to getting some value out of a supporter. I've said this in the past, and I kind of agree with it. I'm not a big fan of Arven without a ton of supporter, or sorry, a ton of tools. But we see 3, and I guess that's enough. Again, we see the Friendship Poffin, Buddy Poffin, no Vs, so you can search out almost every basic in your deck with Buddy Poffin, which is incredibly useful. We do see Professor Toad's Scenario as well, which is really interesting, paired with higher counts of Super Rod, so you can scoop up your Professor Toad's Scenario. And as I was saying at the beginning of the video, and for those of you who've played against this, you know Charizard EX is a very tanky deck. There are some ways of one-shotting it. Notably, there is an Iron Leaves EX that is incredibly powerful at one-shotting Charizard. Pretty much that's what it does. It does a few other things, but it mostly one-shots Charizard, and Charizard as well as Roaring Moon are both weak to grass, so they're kind of being targeted for weakness, so that's something I'd be kind of wary of, because most decks trying to beat you will be trying to one-shot you. But Professor's Charizard Scenario, if you're able to use it and heal up a few times, because it returns Charizard DX to your hand, you do lose the energy, but it's very powerful, and I think that's a really interesting card. It does also help against Control, and Control is a deck I plan on making a video about in the upcoming future. But overall, I think it's a very solid list, and I like the addition of the healing cards, but similar as well. This one, again, similar. I don't think we see, yeah, we saw Charmander splits in the other ones. It doesn't really matter, but we saw them. This list, again, Barrel, Squivit, Charizard, a Maximum Bell for Steelstone, Entei, Lumineon, very similar to the other list, mixing and matching some of the ideas, but pretty good, very good, in fact. And you do get that powerful value out of Arven with the Seal Stone, which is an incredibly powerful tool you can use just once in the game, as well as the Maximum Belt. So Arven gets really good with A-Specs, is pretty much what I'm saying. And there is Irida. We're going to talk about Irida. Irida is also much better with A-Specs, but we'll talk about that. And then here we see some really interesting things. I think, yeah, this is the last barrel, and then we're going to look at Pidgeot. But this is a bit more interesting in the terms of being like a toolboxy style build, although the jet energies are a little strange to me. But we see Delphox V doing 120 to the active and one of their bench. You do Blossom and some energy, but that's not a huge deal. But then the other new card here, or the actual the new attacker here is Gouging Fire EX. It's kind of like Entei V, I guess. Gouging Fire is ancient Entei, but you do Fierce Fire Outburst. That's a weird name for an attack. But you do 260 for Fire colorless. You can't use it again until you switch out of the active spot, which quite frankly is the same thing as you can't use it again next turn, because really you won't be staying in there more than one turn. You're not going to be like living in the active, not being able to do anything for a bunch of turns. But keep in mind that is, I guess, why the jet energies are there. But I feel like that's still not a huge deal. Anyway, it's very powerful. 260 is a lot of damage, and that is actually a very similar amount to Radiant Charizard. It is a little more, though, and that means that if your opponent has like a... Actually, I was going to say Gardevoir EX, because that is 310 HP, but you can just one-shot that with Charizard because it's weak. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure why this is here, but obviously 260 is nice, 230 HP is nice. You also have Magma Basin. I think Magma Basin works with Entei, but I think this deck has some cool ideas. Roxanne is a very good card as well. Overall, this is kind of similar in its like basic concept, but we do see some more text, and Charizard EX is a deck that you couldn't put text into, especially with some either greater consistency or just greater tech ability with the A-Specs or A-Spec card that you of your choice. And I feel like the Force Seal Stone, the one of Force Seal Stone, is quite useful as well. Although I would like to see an NTV in a list like this. This next list is pretty interesting, running the Pidgeot Rotom Charizard type deck. And the Rotom V is still searchable, but it's not as searchable without Battle VIP Pass. But you do run 4 Nest Ball, 4 Ultra Ball. But Ultra Ball's value also feels lower without the barrel. We do still see high counts of Arvin and Iono and Boss. We do see Maximum Belt as the spec of choice. And honestly, this list is very similar. We do actually see Mew EX, which is kind of interesting. I don't know entirely why that's there, but it's a good card. I mean, it allows for obviously copying attacks and drawing. It can be useful. I suppose if you get Iono to 1, it could be useful. I don't know. But it's just a very good card overall. One thing, I didn't really point this out before. I think Manaphy without Jirachi is good. I've said this a lot, and I think Manaphy without Jirachi is really good and the way to go. Keep in mind there is a new, I think it's Relor. Let me see if it's Relor. No, the one that evolves from Relor. I don't remember what it is. Vabska. There we go. That says prevent damage and effects done to your opponent, done to your bench Pokemon from your opponent's attacks, which is really useful. If your opponent's like hitting with Sableye or Radiant Greninja and it stops both. I don't know if you really play this, but this is an option. But I do think Manaphy is better than Jirachi, and I've said that before. And I like that this list just runs Manaphy. Overall pretty straightforward. But you do have that Pidgeot EX, and as I said, no path to the peak. And path really sucks for this deck. So being immune to that now because it's gone is quite useful for you. Next up, however, we have a really interesting list. I was talking about Jirachi not being that good. We have Toedscool EX, which stops all effective attacks, stopping stuff like Giratina V-Star, but then also you have this Toedscool, which, for those of you who don't know, cards in your opponent's discard can't be put into their hand by the effects of their opponent's abilities or trainer cards. This also stops Pokestop, so it Pokestops them. Yeah, that's funny. But no, Toedscool is obviously useful against that. It's useful against Chien-Pao and Goldengo as well, two pretty decent decks. I don't think they're like top decks. Chien-Pao might be a top deck. Goldengo also might be a top deck. I'm not a massive fan of either of them, but I know they're still pretty good, and it's useful against those. And then I mean, they're just great tech cards, and tech cards are easier to play with Pidgeot EX because you can search out one of. So we don't see 4 Friendship Poffin or Buddy Poffin, which to me is a little surprising, but you do have NTV, BUEX, and Luminia V, all of which can't be searched out by, and Radiant Charizard. So I guess I see it. You still run, I don't know, I would like to see 4 Nest Ball or 4 Friendship Poffin, though. We do see Maximum Belt as well, so very little Prime Catcher being played. Maximum Belt really works well with Charizard EX because Charizard EX's damage breakpoints are a little weaker are a little lower, and also change some because its damage is scalar or modular throughout the course of the game. So this card will push it over the edge. That's why you see cards like Defiance Band, Choice Belt, Choice Band. I don't remember the ones that boost damage. Vitality Band. You get the ideas. Choice Belt. Yeah, there we go. So you see those cards which are in it, and then Maximum Belt is just another addition. I don't like Arvin with 2 tools. I think that's kind of silly. I don't like 3 Arvin with 2 tools. I think that's bad, in fact. But I know some people like playing decks like that. We do see the Collapse Stadium looking for that value. Also, you can get that healing. I mentioned Professor Taro's scenario, but Collapse Stadium in some sense gives you a similar amount of healing. Next up, we have a list with Arceus V-Star. This is the last Charizard list we're going to be looking at. Barrel, Arceus, Charizard, in some sense, very streamlined. Again, Arceus having that ability similar to Pidgeot, and quite frankly, without Path stopping it, Arceus is just super consistent. Buddy Poffin is not going to be searching out Arceus V, but Nest Ball will and Ultra Ball will. And again, having that barrel gives better value to Ultra Ball. We see Codebreaker's Solution or whatever. This card that gets 2 cards on top of your deck, again, good with the barrel. TM Evolution is insane because you can grab out of the deck the Arceus V-Star, and you can also attack with Arceus V-Star, which could be useful. It's not the most useful, not really going to be accelerating to a second one because you only run 2 Arceus, but pretty useful in certain specific scenarios, and 200 is more than 180. Assuming you don't have a double turbo on, which you probably do, but you don't have to. So you can potentially be pushing up to 250 turn 2. if you're up against an EX, which could be nice, I guess. The breakpoint would be 260 for Goldango, but 250 is nice. Next up, we're going into the Chien-Pao base decks. Chien-Pao Excalibur decks. This one runs Kyogre and Iron Hand, and this looks very similar. Canceling Clone is played. It is interesting. It's obviously good. We see Pokestop as well, and Superior Energy Retrieval. This deck just dies to Toedscool, but we do see Prime Catch and Codebreaker's Deciphering or whatever. This card is very good in this deck specifically because you can stack your deck and then again draw with the barrel, which I mentioned earlier. You can also draw with Radiant Greninja. Don't Chien-Pao if you shuffle, obviously. It won't be those cards won't be on top. Or you could use Pokestop. Obviously, if they aren't items, they're just going to get discarded, which probably is not what you want. Just using it to discard energies is not very useful, but you can use it to stack 2 items in Pokestop. That does not seem like the best option, but it is an option. And there will be cases where you want to use it. And then Irida, obviously Irida. And Irida, honestly, Codebreaker's solution forms like a 5th Irida, except it's better because it can get any 2 cards, but you do need a barrel, Radiant Ninja, or potentially Pokestop to get that value out, or Mew-EX. I don't know exactly how useful Mew-EX will be, but you can do that. As I said, there's Kyogre, Radiant Greninja, and Kyogre are both bench type Pokemon, so Canceling Clone could be useful there. In terms of gusting, no cross switcher. You have Prime Catcher, as I mentioned earlier. Incredibly powerful card in the deck because you can search out with Irida. It won't be milled off a Pokestop. That's a huge deal. Pokestop decks sometimes play Force Seal Stone, and then you'd Force Seal Stone, you'd Pokestop, and you'd lose your Force Seal Stone. You'd just be sad. Now that's not a thing because you don't play that, and Prime Catcher doesn't get milled by Pokestop, which is incredibly powerful. So you see really high, heavy item counts, which is normal in Chien-Pao, but the fact that this can be your only gust is good, but also sketchy in my opinion. Is in this list here we see some more interesting things in my opinion. We do not see Friendship Poffin in this deck either. Here we see 4, but then we see Counter Catcher. As I said, that kind of functions like Prime Catcher. It's not as good, right? You can't use it the whole game, but it's not your A spec, so it's not a bad alternative. Aside from that, we do see the Iron Hand as well, which I think is fine. Then we see this Ditto. This Ditto is so good in this deck, and we'll see it later certainly. But it says if it's in the active on your first turn, then you can search the deck for any basic and then swap it with Ditto. That can be a card like Chien-Pao with its abilities, so you can use it and then get some energy, or it can be whatever you need. Right? It's pretty useful. Only turn 1 though, so it essentially turns Buddy Poffin into Buddy Poffin or Friendship Poffin into Battle VIP Pass. You do need to get into the active as well. You need to retreat into it. I've seen lists exactly like this, and they're pretty good because you obviously have that normal stuff, but then you have Ditto, Buddy Poffin forming that Battle VIP Pass. You have that Prime Catcher just being good, and you have Canceling Clone combos. The Counter Catcher and Prime Catcher also gives you pretty good access to Gust throughout most of the game. We do see the One of Iono. I think One of Iono is bad. I'm going to say that. I think One of Iono in a Pokestop deck will not work. I think 2 Pokestop in a Pokestop deck isn't amazing. I mean, I'm not a Pokestop player either, though. It's a different type of game you're playing with Pokestop. You're just gambling a lot, but obviously this deck is very powerful. Oh, and I think I didn't say this. All these decks like won tournaments. That doesn't necessarily matter too much. I think a deck doesn't have to win a tournament to be good, but it's nice to know. This list is very similar. We see this other barrel though. I don't know exactly why. It says cards in your deck. Oh, actually I do. Cards in your deck can't be discarded by effects of your opponent's attacks, abilities, item cards, or supporter cards. There's also a card called Patrol Cap, which is similar, but it is a tool. But Barrel here is really useful because it allows you to have that mill protection versus there's a really good mill card, right? There are a few good mill cards, but there's a great test, which is, well, it's great. So Barrel is a nice counter to that, and that's something I wasn't thinking about, but that's actually potentially really useful. We can actually look at the tournament. Looks like no one was running that. I'm looking. Yeah, it looks like they didn't run. They could run in here. No, okay, looks like that didn't happen, but it is a possibility. Oh, I clicked off the list. So, you get some potentially really good value out of that in that matchup. I mean, you're almost guaranteed to win if they can't mill you, because then you can just kind of go and do whatever you want. And this says Okay, yeah, this doesn't stop Steam, so you're not going to be stopping at Pokestop, which would be bad or weird. It would just be very strange. We do see a boss. I don't hate a boss. You can mill it with Pokestop, but also you can use it if you're not losing. So as opposed to counter catcher, we do see the Iono as well. Again, not a massive fan of those with Pokestop. Specifically Iono. Iono is a card you want at certain specific points in the game. You're literally never going to be able to search it out because that's just not a thing you can do. But I know some people like it. And then the Prime Catcher, Pokestop combo, as well as Irida is just so insane. It's really good. And lastly, we have a list that doesn't run Iron Hands and it does run Palkia. It's a similar concept, but we do see the Palkia actually having access to a V-Star power. And Irida also, I didn't really say this, but Irida is search for water Pokemon plus get Gust if you have Prime Catcher in deck. You do have to use your Prime Catcher. Some people are going to say, oh, Irida is just now another boss, but it's not, because Prime Catcher won't always be in your deck. If you've used it, I mean, Irida is not another boss. Assuming you don't have like Counter Catcher. And there are ways to recover Prime Catcher, but they're not the best. So I know, I think Prime Catcher is really good. I'm not saying it's not. But yeah, it's very good. And canceling clone now is much more active because you can use it. You can find the code breakers, deciphering. You can just do a lot of really good stuff. I think Chien-Pao is definitely going to be a top tier deck, probably top 10. The meta's going to shift a bunch with post rotation, I think. We're going to get just a lot of new good decks, but I don't think the older decks that are good are really going to fall off, especially Chien-Pao and Charizard. They're going to be two decks that get better. They're getting new cards. They're not losing too much. And they're losing Battle VIP Pass, but Buddy Poffin's almost as good. But I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider subscribing, liking, commenting your thoughts down below as always as well. And I'm excited to see you in the next video.